So some of you may or may not know that full-time, I'm actually the director of marketing at a software company based in the Denver, Colorado area called The Receptionist. And at The Receptionist, we have our core values, which spell out the word fabric, and they are fun, authentic, bold, respectful, innovative, and collaborative. And I want to talk to you about respectful because underneath respectful, we have this phrase that we use, which is assume positive intent. If you go into a meeting or if you get an email from a coworker, perhaps challenging your views or your ideas, assume positive intent is what we always say. Believe that your coworkers have the company's best interest at heart and want to see all of us do really well. We just have a different idea or a different way of getting to that end goal. And so if we both go into the discussion about said topic, assuming positive intent of the other person, then we can set aside negative, hurt feelings. We can ward off this thing that often permeates in business, the idea that they're out to get me. That they are against my ideas, and we can build up these conversations and these monsters in our head when that happens. And it's happened to me in business before as well. So that's the business case for it, assuming positive intent. And how this relates to the work of finding common ground and being able to communicate through differences, I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. We don't often enough assume positive intent of the person across from us. In fact, we more often default to assuming the worst from people, especially if we start to assign labels or stereotype them or lump them into groups that are different than us. And I want to bring up a quote from Monica Guzman, who wrote the book, I Never Thought of It That Way. She's going to be on my podcast here soon, but something she said in her TEDx talk really resonates here, that people who are underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your mind. And when that happens, we begin to assume things about people that may or may not be true about them. We may believe that because they see an issue differently, and because we value things differently, we may eventually begin to think they're not just wrong, they're not just seeing it differently than me, but they are evil. They are morally wrong. And I then you start to build up this justification of not only disagreeing with that person or not talking to that person, but going so far as to justify hatred of that person, or take it even a step further, justify violence against that person. Because who could argue with you defending your morals, what you believe to be morally right, in the face of evil? This is called affective polarization. And it is immensely prevalent on social media. It is so easy to take snippets of speeches or talks and take them out of context and begin to create and spin an entire narrative that plants an us versus them mentality, a right versus wrong, good versus evil duality of choice on so many issues that we get to this place where we no longer assume the person across from us has good intent. In fact, we assume that they have ill intent. And who would stop us from hating them, from going a step further and violently attacking them for the good cause, for our cause? You see where this gets us into trouble, right? And this is not just a one-party thing on the political side. This is not just a right versus left thing or a left versus right. This is on so many issues that we deal with as a society. There's a reason why where I work at The Receptionist, we even have to say that part of respect is assuming positive intent, because it's so easy for us to default to thinking the other person has ill intentions, right? And this is where we begin to stereotype and label, and this is where not only communication breaks down, but the ability to solve problems together breaks down. You see it in business, and certainly you see it in all aspects, so many aspects of our society these days. So what would change then? I guess the question, if I had one to end this with, is what would change if you began to assume positive intent of people? Well, you'd have to ask them questions to understand what they value, wouldn't you? You'd have to ask them questions and dig a little bit deeper of why they think and believe and act a little bit differently than you, so that you can assume, or so that your assumptions about their positive intentions, you can see how they came to those beliefs, what's been true in their life that they may feel and think and act differently than you. This is an important step, an important self-awareness step of creating common ground, of bridging divides, of having more curious conversations out there in the world. It starts with looking for other people who think a little bit differently than you, and like Monica Guzman said, introducing them into your life so they are not overrepresented in your mind and your imagination. I just love that quote from Monica Guzman here. So what I want to leave you with, and as the last part of my notes here, I want to leave you with this. By doing so, by not assuming positive intent, by vilifying and making an enemy of people who believe differently than you, and by assuming that they are evil rather than assuming they have positive intent, it's actually very, very counterproductive to your goals. Nothing gets done if nothing changes, and nothing changes if we continue to divide and separate and sort and stereotype. It's actually incredibly counterproductive to your goals of moving things forward in a positive manner to assume that someone else has ill intent. You have no bridge to build there. There's nothing even there to begin to walk across, to shake hands and build common ground in that world. So if you want something to change, then it starts with how you see the other person and digging into their background, and hopefully they do the same for you. So assume positive intent. Start there. Make sure that, gosh, if we assumed positive intent more and made people prove to us negative intent, actual real negative intent, not just stuff we disagree with, but ill intent, evil intent, how would things change if we went into that with our first mindset being assuming positive intent? It's a powerful thing when you do it. It changes conversations. It changes outcomes when you do that.